What can you tell about a person's life from a set of footprints? That's a question archaeologists have been debating for decades. Could you tell how someone moved? What they looked like? How they behaved? Well, in the American Museum of Natural History, a pair of footprints have been the centerpiece at the Spitzer Hall of Human Origin for years. Scientists have used these footprints to trace the evolution of walking, but have never agreed on what it says about our ancestral social and sexual behavior. While scientists continue to butt heads over how and who our ancestors mated with, museum art regularly portrays them as heterosexual monogamists. This has caused concerns over exhibits misrepresenting human sexual orientation. Deep in the museum, past the planetarium and the taxidermy, are the Litoli footprints, which mark the center of the Hall of Human Origin. Above them stand a reconstructed couple of Australopithecus afarensis, one of our earliest bipedal ancestors. The species of upright walking hominins lived between 2.9 to 3.9 million years ago. For nearly 900,000 years, the species thrived around the Horn of Africa. You might be familiar with Lucy, the popular Ethiopian fossil named for the Beatles song. So what do these fossils actually tell archaeologists?
This is a cast of the Litoli footprints. They were initially discovered by a paleoanthropologist named Mary Leakey working in northern Tanzania in the 1970s. What we're seeing here are two different footprints made by two, maybe three individuals of a species called Australopithecus afarensis. The way these were formed was that a local volcano produced ash, which then got rained on, making a mud. These two or three individuals of Australopithecus afarensis walked across that mud, making the footprints. Then before the footprints could be eroded away by more rain, a volcano erupted again, causing a new ashfall, preserving the footprints to be found millions of years later.
That was Liz Fillion, a PhD holder in biological anthropology. Listen carefully to how she says two, maybe three specimens of Australopithecus afarensis. That's because it's still unclear just how many Australopiths we're looking at and what the nature of their relationships were. Scientists can't even say definitively that this was a male and female pair. In the wake of newly discovered footprints in 2016, New Scientist magazine published that it's been all too tempting to interpret the original trackways as evidence of prehistoric nuclear families. So the question becomes, with so much uncertainty, is it accurate to portray our ancestors as strictly heterosexual or monogamous families?
I don't think you can produce strong evidence to support a social system from those footprints. But I think to play devil's advocate, another view of this, which is maybe looking at this new trail, Site S, is that maybe we're looking at a large social group.
That was Professor Scott Williams, assistant professor of anthropology at New York University. Sitting down with Scott, we spoke about the kinds of stories that can and can't be inferred from footprints.
This is really important because they were discovered in the mid-1970s. This was by Mary Leakey, her team, and they were very relevant at the time regarding debates about how much time these hominins spent in trees and what their bipedal gait was like. You know, whether they were bipedal but walked around more like chimpanzees with sort of a bent hip, bent knee gait, or whether they walked around with a gait much like that of a human.
But if the footprints signify an important debate about how humans came to walk on 2 feet, how did scientists end up imagining a romance between two early ancestors?
It's a beautiful exhibit, but at the same time, it might be misleading to people who take away from that exhibit without reading anything. And people who are visiting the museum here are probably Westerners who who live in a monogamous system for the most part, and so they might say, "Oh, they're just like us. They loved each other," and etc. So I think in that regard, yeah, it could be misinterpreted. And this is not just a case of scientific data being interpreted. It is scientific data, Litoli footprints, with art on top of it. Somebody has interpreted this and made this artistic representation of what they think these things were doing.
To test that, we spoke to students who had just visited the museum and asked them what they took away from the exhibit.
My takeaway, what I think that was trying to show us, was how similar we are to those that came before us and how different.
The gestures that they were making and the actual models themselves really show what two people would do nowadays if they were walking with each other.
That's what I thought. Just like an adult, two children. That's what I thought.
I thought it was two kids and like a dad, but usually I would think a dad though.
Even past human cultures, we assume that they were in, you know, nuclear families and things that wouldn't even make sense for survival or culture.
There could be romantic, but mostly like, what would you call them? Like, I don't want to say friends, like familiars, companionship, because one was having its arm over the other one as they were walking, so you know, you could guess that they were close.
It seemed unclear to the students what these statues actually represented. We know the footprints could possibly represent a pair of male and female Australopiths, but what are the chances they were an actual heterosexual couple or family?
Our behaviors are rooted in our fossil record, but I think at the same time, you know, look at modern human social systems. There's no consistency there. We're not a monogamous species. Some cultures are monogamous, but clearly not every one of those cultures are. So I think if you're trying to argue that these hominins that lived 3.5 million years ago were monogamous based on their footprints, to speculate about the origins of human sociosexual behavior is very problematic. I mean, I don't think we can trace it so easily. I just don't think that you're going to find the answers there for modern human behaviors because we are so flexible and plastic as a species.